If you're over 55, your bladder nerve fires a false alarm between 1 and 3 a.m. every single night. A 2016 study from Brigham and Women's Hospital found that nearly 80% of adults over 65 wake to urinate at least once per night, and the majority believe their bladder is full. It is not. Your brain is lying to you, and the mechanism behind that lie is something most urologists never explain to their patients. Here is what most people assume. They assume they wake up because their bladder is full, that some internal tank has reached capacity, a signal fires, and the body does what it must. That explanation feels logical. It feels mechanical, and for decades, even doctors operated under that assumption. But a study from Weiss and colleagues at SUNY Downstate Medical Center found no relationship between specific urodynamic diagnoses and the number of times patients woke to void at night. None. What that means in plain language is this. The measured fullness of your bladder did not predict how often you woke up to use the bathroom. Something else is pulling you out of sleep. The researchers suggested that patients were waking first, due to a primary sleep disturbance, and then deciding to urinate. The bladder was not the cause, it was the excuse. Now, this does not mean your bladder is irrelevant. It means the story is far more complicated than a simple overflow mechanism. Your nervous system, your hormones, your circadian clock, and the physical structure of your bladder wall are all conspiring in a very specific way between midnight and 4 a.m. But the real question is why your body sabotages your deepest sleep with a signal that did not exist when you were 35. And the answer involves a nerve pathway most people have never heard of. Your bladder is controlled by a region in your brainstem called the pontine micturition center, also known as Barrington's nucleus. Think of it as a switching station. During the day, it receives signals from stretch receptors embedded in your bladder wall. Those receptors measure tension. When your bladder fills to roughly 300 to 400 milliliters, about 12 to 14 ounces, those receptors fire through the pelvic nerve, travel up your spinal cord, and arrive at this switching station in your brainstem. The brainstem then communicates with your cerebral cortex. Your conscious brain decides, now or later. This system works beautifully when you are awake, but during sleep, the rules change. When you are in deep sleep, what sleep scientists call stage 3 or slow wave sleep, your brain suppresses those afferent signals from your bladder. Think of it like a nighttime security guard dimming the alarm system. The stretch receptors still fire, the pelvic nerve still transmits, but the brainstem raises the threshold. It says, not yet. Your cortex stays offline. You keep sleeping. Here is the problem. After age 50, you spend dramatically less time in deep sleep. A 2004 meta-analysis by O'Hayon and colleagues, published in the journal Sleep, examined 65 studies involving nearly 3,600 subjects and found that slow-wave sleep decreases by roughly 2% per decade after age 20. By the time you reach 60, you may spend less than 10% of your night in that protective deep stage. And that matters enormously for your bladder. Because when you are in lighter sleep stages, stage 1 or stage 2, that suppression system weakens. Your brainstem no longer raises the threshold. The pelvic nerve signal gets through, and your cortex wakes up, perceives the signal, and interprets it as urgency, even if your bladder holds only 150 milliliters. Half of what it would need during the day to trigger the same sensation. Dr. Derek Griffiths at the University of Pittsburgh demonstrated through functional MRI studies that the brain regions responsible for inhibiting bladder signals during sleep show reduced blood flow and reduced activation in older adults. Your internal security guard is not just dimming the alarm, he is falling asleep on the job. But this is only half the story. What happens to your hormone system between midnight and 3 a.m. is even more disturbing. Your kidneys do not produce urine at a constant rate. They follow a circadian rhythm, a 24-hour biological clock that is supposed to slow down urine production while you sleep. The hormone primarily responsible for this is vasopressin, also called antidiuretic hormone. When vasopressin levels rise, your kidneys reabsorb more water. Less urine enters your bladder. You sleep through the night. In healthy young adults, vasopressin peaks during the nighttime hours. This is well documented. The circadian rhythm of urine output is typically established by age 5, the same age most children stop wetting the bed. But here is what changes with age. Multiple studies, including work by Kirkland and colleagues published in the Journal of the American Geriatric Society, have shown that in healthy older adults, this nocturnal vasopressin surge becomes blunted. Some researchers describe it as flattened. Others say it disappears entirely. The rhythm that kept your kidneys quiet for 8 hours simply fades. The consequence is measurable. Kirkland's study found that healthy older adults produced 52% of their daily urine output during the nighttime hours, compared to just 25% in young adults. Same total volume over 24 hours, but more than double the proportion arriving in the bladder between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. If you have ever woken at 2 a.m. with an urgent need to urinate and thought, "I did not even drink that much water," this is what is happening inside your body. Your kidneys are flooding your bladder at a rate your sleeping brain was never designed to handle. And it gets worse. A second hormone, atrial natriuretic peptide, or ANP, rises with age, particularly during the night. ANP causes your kidneys to excrete more sodium, and sodium pulls water with it. Research by Collagen and colleagues found that global ANP levels are significantly higher in older adults compared to younger ones. Higher ANP means more sodium leaving the blood. More sodium means more water in the urine. More water means your bladder fills faster. So now you have a double problem. Your brainstem is less effective at suppressing bladder signals during light sleep, and your kidneys are producing more urine precisely during the hours when your brain's suppression system is weakest. If this is making sense, and you want the part about what you can actually do about it, subscribe now. That section is coming in about 5 minutes, and it changes the way you approach every single night from tonight forward. But none of this explains the most critical piece: what your bladder wall itself is doing between the ages of 55 and 75, and why that structural change turns a manageable problem into a nightly ordeal. What almost nobody talks about is what happens to the physical tissue of your bladder as you age. Not the nerve, not the hormone, the wall itself. Your bladder is made of a muscle called the detrusor. In a young, healthy bladder, the detrusor is predominantly smooth muscle with interwoven collagen fibers providing structural support. The ratio matters. Muscle gives your bladder flexibility, the ability to stretch as urine accumulates without building pressure. Collagen gives it structure. When that ratio shifts toward more collagen and less muscle, your bladder loses compliance. Research from the University of Pittsburgh by Dr. Laurie Berder and colleagues, published across multiple papers between 2018 and 2021, demonstrated that aged bladder tissue shows increased collagen deposition, inappropriate collagen recruitment at lower pressures, mitochondrial dysfunction, and increased reactive oxygen species in the bladder wall. In plain terms, your bladder stiffens. It becomes less elastic, and a stiff bladder at half capacity generates the same internal pressure that a young bladder generates at full capacity. This is the piece that connects everything. Your pelvic nerve afferents, the sensory fibers monitoring your bladder, do not measure volume, they measure tension, pressure against the wall. So when your bladder wall stiffens, those fibers begin firing at lower volumes. The research is clear on this. Hardy and colleagues at the University of Connecticut published a 2019 study in neurology and urodynamics, showing that aged bladders have an inverse relationship between age and afferent firing rate accuracy. Old nerves are less reliable in transmitting accurate information about actual bladder content. Read that again. Your bladder nerve is sending an urgent distress signal to your sleeping brain, and the information is wrong. Your bladder is not full, it is stiff. At 2 a.m., your brain, already hovering in light sleep because your slow-wave sleep has declined, receives a signal from your pelvic nerve saying your bladder is at capacity. Your vasopressin is too low to have slowed urine production adequately. Your ANP is too high, pushing extra sodium and water into the bladder. And the wall of your bladder, now stiffer than it was a decade ago, is generating tension signals at 150 milliliters instead of 350. Every system is conspiring. Not because something is broken, because every system aged at the same time, in the same direction. The research is still evolving on exactly how much each factor contributes. Some scientists dispute whether vasopressin is the primary driver, or whether sleep architecture is more important. A study from Blywise and colleagues found that older adults with more stage 3 sleep woke fewer times to void, suggesting that if you could deepen sleep, the bladder problem might partially resolve on its own. So the question becomes, if your body has these interconnected systems all degrading your nighttime bladder control simultaneously, what can you actually do about it? Step 1. Restrict fluids strategically, not aggressively. Stop drinking all liquids 90 minutes before bed. Not 30 minutes, not 60, 90. This gives your kidneys time to process what is already in your bloodstream before your vasopressin begins its overnight shift. Dr. Philip van Kerrebroek at Maastricht University Medical Center has recommended this specific timing window in clinical guidelines for nocturia management since 2012. Step 2. Empty your bladder twice before sleep. The first void should happen 60 minutes before bed. The second should happen immediately before lying down. This double void technique ensures residual urine that remains after your first void due to incomplete emptying, does not give your bladder a head start on reaching threshold pressure. Step 3. Elevate your legs for 20 minutes in the late afternoon, between 4 and 6 p.m. When you stand or sit all day, fluid pools in your lower extremities. When you lie flat at night, that fluid re-enters your bloodstream and is filtered by your kidneys, producing urine precisely when you do not want it. Elevating your legs earlier forces that redistribution to happen while you are still awake, so your kidneys process the excess fluid before bed. Researchers at the University of Tokyo documented in a 2014 study that afternoon leg elevation reduced nighttime urine volume by up to 36% in elderly subjects. Step 4. Address your sleep architecture directly. Exposure to bright light, at least 10,000 lux, for 30 minutes within 1 hour of waking strengthens your circadian system. A stronger circadian signal improves the amplitude of vasopressin secretion at night. It also deepens slow-wave sleep. Both of these changes reduce the likelihood of waking to a bladder signal. Depending on who you ask, this single intervention may be the most underutilized tool for nocturia in adults over 60. Step 5. Practice timed pelvic floor contractions. When you feel the urge to urinate at night, perform 5 rapid pelvic floor contractions. Squeeze, hold for 2 seconds, release before getting up. This engages the pudendal nerve, which reflexively inhibits the detrusor muscle. It buys you time. In many cases, the urgency will diminish enough that you can return to sleep without voiding. Step 6. Reduce sodium intake after 3 p.m. Sodium drives fluid into the urine. Evening sodium is processed overnight. A 2016 study from Nagasaki University found that reducing salt intake alone decreased nighttime voiding frequency from an average of 2.3 episodes to 1.4 episodes per night in subjects over 60. If even one of these steps was new to you, hit like. It tells the algorithm to show this to more people who need it. And most people who need it have no idea this information exists. Here is the larger truth about what your bladder does at 2 a.m. It is not malfunctioning. It is not diseased in most cases. It is responding honestly to a body that has changed. A brain that sleeps lighter, a kidney that ignores the clock, a bladder wall that confuses stiffness for fullness, and a nerve that reports what it feels rather than what is real. You did not break this system. Time did. But time does not mean you are powerless. The science is clear, and it has been clear for over a decade, that nocturia in older adults is rarely a single cause problem. It is a convergence, hormone, nerve, muscle, and sleep all meeting at the same vulnerable hour. Historians still argue whether the bladder or the brain is the primary driver. The answer, increasingly, appears to be both, simultaneously. I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. How many times are you waking per night right now? And have you ever been told by a doctor that your sleep depth might be the actual trigger? I'd bet most of you have been told it is a prostate issue or a weak bladder. And for some of you, that is part of it. But for many of you, the real mechanism has never been explained until now. Your bladder is not failing. It is whispering in a language your sleeping brain can no longer ignore. Share this with someone who gets up twice a night and blames it on water. They deserve to know what is actually happening. And if you have not subscribed yet, you should. What is coming next week goes deeper into what your circadian system does to every organ in your body between midnight and dawn. I have been building that script for weeks. Your body still knows how to sleep through the night. You just have to stop fighting the wrong enemy.